Okay. So any doubts for the questions that were posted yesterday? Any doubt over there? No? Why are you so quiet early in the morning? Any doubts? No doubts over there? But I'm hoping that you all are solving it on a daily basis. That is the reason that I'm sending even in the inquiry group so that nobody misses on the question. Okay. Okay, fine. So just for a quick recap, so that even if somebody is joining new would have an idea that how things have gone by till now. That in the first class we saw that how do we read history. We had some basics about that. How do we get to know what happened in such a distant time? You know, so maybe 500,000 years before or 2,000 years before that, the things that happened. How do we get to know now? And then we started with the Stone Age, right? That different parts of the Stone Age, that is the Paleolithic, the Mesolithic, and the Neolithic age. We saw the stone tools over there. We saw some important developments, that how animal domestication began or what time that Homo sapiens arrived on Earth. Then with the practice of agriculture in Neolithic age, that we have the establishment of new village settlements, right? Okay. And then after that, in from Stone Age, we moved on and we saw that there were some other stone-based cultures as well. Other stone-based cultures, like we had the Chalcolithic age where people were mixing copper with stone. They were using copper from before. Copper independently was used from before, but then now they started mixing copper with stone. So that's called Chalcolithic. And also that people were using large stone pieces in South India, so megalithic age, right? And we saw that as Neolithic people had started, Neolithic people had started practicing agriculture, to support the large population that was living in an area. So some of the people, when they descended down on the banks of river Indus, which has 5 different tributaries, Chenab, Jhelum, Satluj, Ravi, and Beas, that this Indus Valley region was very fertile. The Indus Valley region had ample water resources, and because of that, there was surplus agricultural production. Because now there was surplus agricultural production, and hence flourished the most advanced ancient Indian civilization called the Indus Valley civilization, with a very distinct economy, with a large area, with a unique political structure, egalitarian society, with elements of town planning, right? With modern things like a standard measure, a proper place of burial, etc. But eventually it came to decline because of certain theories that we had seen in the last class, right? And then we had also seen that what are the important things which were excavated from different cities, right? From different cities. For example, from where do we find the stone image of a bearded priest? Which city? The stone image of a bearded priest. Harappa, Mohenjo-daro, Lothal, Surkoteda, where? Mohenjo-daro, right? So these kind of questions, okay, these kind of questions can be expected. For example, say, I will tell you, APPSC 2020, they asked a question that, you know, the symmetry uh, H and R37, I think it was asked, where was it found, right? So Harappa. And second, they asked such a simple question. In fact, if you are studying seriously, you will not even want such simple questions to come. They asked that where was Great Bath located? They did not even ask the city. They gave 4 options, say Vedic civilization, Indus Valley civilization, Mesopotamian civilization, Persian civilization. So at least if you are studying, you would want that only, you answer, others are not able to answer, right? That's the hidden desire we all have in an exam. So, but when such simple questions are asked, probably anybody who's studied history even for 5 days would be able to answer this question. Okay. So the questions are generally very factual and simple in nature. Okay. Yes, please. So there are other cities as well. In fact, they have numerous cities. So I just mentioned about those cities right? I I just mentioned about, I think Chanudaro I mentioned in the class, right? Chanudaro I mentioned without a citadel. हाँ, Chanudaro. Like there are many other cities. You know, for example, last मैंने क्या बोल दिया आपको? राखी गरी है ना जाते जाते. So it's not that there are only some 11, 12 cities. There are hundreds of Indus Valley civilization cities. But what is my idea? That you should have a coverage of the NCRT book, right? The NCRT book plus some other important things. For example, I said that 2016 onwards, that Rakhi Garhi is now the largest Indus Valley civilization city. Therefore, I mentioned this, right? Therefore, I mentioned about Rakhi Garhi. So all the things which are mentioned in NCRT book, right? Besides that, say, if anything, especially if you see APPSC or any state PCS, they also have a tendency to ask questions on the line where UPSC has already asked, just to check your awareness that, are you following, the PYQs or not? Because you're expected to know if you are preparing for civil services, then at least for the own state as well as for UPSC, you are expected to look at the question, right? So those questions also, for example, at times I'm telling you in advance that I will generally mention some very random fact just to ensure that you know what has already come in UPSC, right? So I mentioned about a question also, that Kunda Kunda. It's not mentioned in any book. A, I did not teach. B, because it's not possible to give 100% coverage in case of history. In fact, even now when I teach you, Jainism, I will not अब तो बोल दिया नाम, or else I will not mention, because it's not mentioned in, say, some 3, 4 standard books that you read, right? So there are hundreds of Indus Valley civilization cities, right? Okay, fine. We know that one of the reasons for the decline of Indus Valley civilization was the barbaric Aryan invasion, right? One of the reasons for the decline was the barbaric Aryan invasion. And that gives us a hint that the next civilization which came in India was the Vedic civilization, the Vedic age. And hence the next age is the Vedic age. The next age is the Vedic age. Okay. The Vedic age, it extends from 1600 before Christ up to 600 before Christ. From 1600 before Christ to 600 before Christ. Okay. Now, the Vedic people, they were basically Aryans. Who were the Vedic people? Who were the people in Vedic civilization? They were the Aryan people. What is meant by Aryan? Aryans are basically, Aryan is a Sanskrit word. The word Aryan, it's a Sanskrit word. The meaning of the term Aryan is of noble origin. The meaning of the term Aryan is of noble origin. So this Vedic age, it belongs to Aryans. And this is a Sanskrit word which means of noble origin. In fact, this Aryan supremacy, because they believe that they are of noble origin, right? Please excuse me, at times I will, keep on sipping my coffee, have some biscuits, you know, generally have a busy schedule. So my most of the fooding is either while traveling or while taking class. You are equally free to, eat, sip your coffee in the class without littering the class. That's the only criteria, right? What if you want, like, suppose if anybody has a back-to-back class, or if you're not able to, those of you who sleep late, wake up late, if you want to carry something to bite in the class, that's all right. That's not an issue, right? If you get something tasty, get one extra as well. Okay. So of noble origin. So Aryans ka matlab tha of noble origin. In fact, if I can tell you, that how the Aryans had this sense of Aryan supremacy, that they are very superior as compared to the others. हिटलर ने जो सेकेंड वर्ल्ड वॉर लड़ा, it was fought in the name of Aryan supremacy. He showed this dream to people that I will make one land, one Germany for all the German Aryans. The German Aryans were there in different parts of Europe. So he showed this dream, he showed this vision to the Germans that I will create one land for all the German Aryans. And in fact, it declared that the German Aryans, when he is talking about Aryans, he's talking about the German Aryans, that Aryans are a master race and the others are a slave race. वो आर्यन सुप्रीमेसी बहुत स्ट्रांग थी. In fact, if I can share, I mean, expecting maturity from all the graduate students, there was a very interesting article in Indian Express some 2-3 years back. That such is the high sense of Aryan supremacy still in Europe as well, because Aryans, when they were migrating, they did not only come to India, they even went to different parts of Europe. That especially amongst the Germans, there is so high sense of a Aryan supremacy that Germans, they generally have a clamor, they have a urge to have a German Aryan or an Aryan offspring. They have this desire to have an Aryan offspring. But if you see Europe, in Europe, there has been a lot of intermixing, right? People travel in different parts of Europe very frequently. You don't see people in Asia traveling from one region to another very frequently, right? The boundaries are very, very rigid. But in Europe, that people travel, get settled in each other's country. In fact, today there is a common European Union. So the German Aryans, their clan, that what is called as purity of the clan started to get diluted over a period of time. But then the soldiers of Alexander जब इंडिया पे इन्वेट किया 300 before Christ पे, some of the soldiers of Alexander who got settled in the northwest part of the country, they, in the name of their Aryan supremacy, they maintained the purity of the clan. That means they did not marry outside their community. And it is believed that these people, they are called the Brokpas of Ladakh. Brokpa, not the Brokpas of West Kaming, because we have a Brokpa community in West Kaming as well. The Brokpas of Ladakh, it is believed that they have the highest Aryan feature today. And there was an article some 3 years back in Indian Express, if I remember correctly, that there is what is called as a pregnancy tourism among the Germans, that German women who want to have a pure Aryan offspring, they come to the Brokpa region of Ladakh just to conceive a child with a Brokpa men. Such is the sense of Aryan supremacy, that they consider themselves to be noble of a higher origin. Okay, such is the sense of Aryan supremacy. So Aryans, it meant of noble origin. It is believed, although there are different theories, some books will say Aryans came from North Pole, from heaven, etc. But then the most accepted scientific theory says that Aryans, they came from Central Asia. Through the mountain passes, that the Aryans came from Central Asia. That these Aryans who came from Central Asia, they were very quick and mobile because they were excellent horse riders. Why they were so mobile? Because they were excellent horse riders. They were brilliant archers, and therefore they were able to defeat everyone on the way, and they were able to march ahead. They were able to advance ahead. Okay, they were able to march ahead. They were able to advance ahead because they were brilliant archers. In fact, they were warrior. Why? Because they used to wear a helmet. आर्यन सिविलाइजेशन से हमें हेड गियर मिला, हेलमेट मिला है, एंड वी ऑल्सो गेट एन आर्मर, है ना, एक कोट जो शील्ड की तरह कोट पहनते हैं लोग, वो मिला है. So that shows that their attire was a warrior attire, so they must have been warriors. And for that reason, that they enter through the mountain passes of northwest, They occupy these regions first in the northwestern part of the country, and then they start to march ahead and capture up to the eastern part of the country. How can we say this with guarantee that they came from Central Asia? Do I have a proof? Because many Aryans in India, many Aryan scholars, they say that no, it's a fake theory. Aryans are indigenous to India. So why am I saying that Aryans came from Central Asia? Because in Central Asia, there is an inscription called as the Bogus Koi inscription. There is an inscription called as the Bogus Koi inscription. This Bogus Koi inscription, it mentions the name of Aryan gods. This is basically on this inscription. There is a peace treaty signed in the name of Aryan gods, that we take a pledge that we will not fight again. So the name of Aryan gods are mentioned, and the same Aryan gods who were worshipped in India. The name of the Aryan gods is mentioned, the same Aryan gods who were worshipped in India. Okay. And hence it can be said that Aryans who are now in India, actually that they came from the same region where this inscription lied. Okay, they came from the same region from where this inscription lied. Okay. Now starting with some basic facts about the Vedic age. That the Vedic age is divided into early Vedic age, the early Vedic age from 1600 up to 1000 before Christ, and the later Vedic age from 1000 to 600 before Christ. Now, can you tell me that why this division? Why is it that the Vedic age is divided into early and later Vedic age? And that too, that why from 1600 to 1000 and 1000 to 600? Yes. Why this division? That means something would have happened around 1000 BC, right? Which would have completely changed the life of people. What was that? Yes. 1000 BC was the use of iron, right? Use of iron began, and that completely transformed the life of people, as there was a change in the lives of people at around 1000 before Christ, and hence that there is a distinct period of early Vedic age and there is a distinct period of a later Vedic age, right? Why? Because in 1000 BC there began the use of iron. Okay, we get to know about the life of early Vedic age. We get to know about the life of early Vedic age from the book Rig Veda, and therefore that it is also called as the Rig Vedic age. Rig Vedic age. Early Vedic age is also called as Rig Vedic age. Fine. Okay. Looking at the sources of knowledge, looking at the sources of knowledge of the Vedic age. That how do we get to know about the Vedic age? For the Vedic age, we mostly have the literary resources because the archaeological sources are not in plenty. The archaeological sources are not in plenty. So, the literature of Vedic era is divided into, first, it is called as Samhita literature. Samhita comes from the word Sangrah, collection. The Samhita literature, that is collection, Sangrah. It is a collection of the four Vedas. What are the four Vedas? First, Rig Veda. Rig Veda. The Rig Veda, it comprises of 10 chapters. Each chapter is called a mandal. So 10 chapter or 10 mandal. It comprises of 1017, certain sources write 1028 hymns. So of all the 10 chapters, there is a total of either 1017 or 1028 hymns. And all these hymns, so they are all written in a poetic manner. All these hymns that they are praising in dedication to, they mostly praise or praise God. That they invoke gods and goddesses, they praise gods and goddesses. Rig Veda. So all the hymns which have to be sung in praise of gods and goddesses, where are they mentioned? In Rig Veda. The next Veda is the Sam Veda. The Sam Veda, this word Sam, it actually comes from the term summon, and the meaning of summon is melody. Melody. Sam Veda is essentially a book on music. Sam Veda is a book on music. So all the ragas, all the meter, tone, frequency in which you should sing the verses of Rig Veda, where it is contained, Samveda. So Samveda is not a book on religion. Samveda is actually a book on music. In Rig Veda, all the hymns, all the shlokas are mentioned. For example, अगर आप मूवी देखते हैं हिंदी मूवीज तो उसमें एक बहुत पॉपुलर श्लोक आता है गायत्री मंत्र ओम भूर्भुवः स्व तत् सवितुर है ना पूजा पाठ में दिखाता है so that mantra is mentioned where that mantra is mentioned in Rig Veda. The Gayatri mantra is mentioned in Rig Veda, but when you hear the priest chanting the shloka, the priest does not read out in the manner I read. So he does not read as if he is reading a literature that Om Bhurbhuva Swa Tat Savitur Vari. Not like this. The priest actually sings it in a particular tone, in a particular meter, right? So it's like that guitar notebook, right? From where you look at and you play guitar. So it's like that how to sing these hymns is told by Samaveda. So if you listen to the priest will actually sing it out like Om Bhurbhuva, something like this. So that how to sing it is mentioned in Samaveda, right? The verses are mentioned in Rig Veda. How to sing these hymns, they are mentioned in Samaveda. Third, so Samveda is a book on music. Okay. Third, Yajur Veda. Yajur Veda, this contains rituals and sacrifices. This contains rituals and sacrifices. So when we, traditionally when people used to offer their prayers to gods and goddesses, they used to sing hymn. So hymns mila Rig Veda say how to sing Samaveda, but then that rituals were not just performed as it is, that people had to make some offering, some sacrifice, right? What kind of ritual to perform, what kind of sacrifices to offer, where is it mentioned? In Yajurveda. In fact, these three Vedas, they were compiled by Aryans. They were compiled by Aryans. And over a period of time, when the Aryans started settling down from northwest to the other regions in the country, that they were also benefited by the knowledge of indigenous people. And the fourth Veda, basically, which is the Atharva Veda, the fourth Veda, which is Atharva Veda, this is a Veda which was compiled by a non-Aryan. This was not by an Aryan, this was by a non-Aryan sage. And because it was by a non-Aryan, so it it provided the indigenous knowledge of people of India to the Aryans. So this contains all the practical knowledge, the practical knowledge of indigenous people, of indigenous people. For example, the knowledge of agriculture. So when Aryans came, they were very, very primitive. They did not have much idea of agriculture, but they got the knowledge of agriculture from which book? From Atharva Veda. And this Veda was written by a non-Aryan. So basically, Aryans learned the art of modern agriculture from the indigenous people. Also, because the indigenous people, they also believed in spirit, good spirit, bad spirit. So there is generally, आप देखेंगे गांव बस्ती में belief होता है that somebody has been controlled, है ना? Maybe by a, for example, कि किसी को किसी दूसरे आदमी ने अपने वश में कर लिया है, that a person has been charmed by a spirit, charmed, that is why he is behaving in a particular manner, or the person has been captured by an evil spirit, right? These are popular beliefs. So but then if it is a belief, you need a solution to it. So in Atharva Veda, it was also mentioned how to dispel charms and evils. How to dispel charms and evils is also mentioned in Atharva Veda. So Atharva Veda comprised of all the practical knowledge which was available to people, all the utilitarian knowledge, all the knowledge that could be utilized by the people, be it agriculture to provide food, or be it the knowledge that how to set a person free from an evil spirit or a charming spirit that has captured a person. Okay. The next book is Brahmana. Brahmanas were basically, they are like book review, because this text of Samhita was slightly complex. The text of Samhita was slightly complex, and for that reason, that a short description, for example, you read a book and then you write a commentary on the book, that's a book review. So this was also a commentary on the Samhita literature. Brahmanas are nothing but commentary on Samhita literature. And this also mainly it talks about the science of sacrifice, that why offering sacrifice is important, that this book also talks about the science of sacrifice. The third literature was called as Aranyak literature. Aranyak. By chance, anybody happens to know the meaning of the word Aranya? Yes? Forest. Good. फॉरेस्ट। अरण्य का मतलब होता है, इट्स लाइक थोड़ा ज्यादा टिपिकल हिंदी वर्ड, अरण्य, अरण्य इज फॉरेस्ट. So this was basically forest books. These were the forest books. This book was written in forest, and to read this book it was expected that a person goes in forest, lives in isolation, and then read these books. It was to be read in isolation as well. Okay, it was to be read in isolation as well. So Aranyak, but I will get back to Aranyak. Before that, let me go to the fourth and the last part of the Vedas, where the Vedas ended. Vedas ended in Upanishad. Upanishad. The literal meaning of the word Upanishad. The meaning of the word Upanishad, just like the meaning of the word Aryan is of noble origin, right? The meaning of the word Aryan is of noble origin. Similarly, the meaning of the word Upanishad is, it comes from three Sanskrit root words, Up, Un and Ishad. Up, Un and Ishad. इसका मतलब होता है to be seated at the feet of the Guru. The meaning, literal meaning of this word is to be seated at the feet of the Guru, to acquire knowledge. To be seated at the feet of the Guru to acquire knowledge. That is the meaning of Upanishad. And Upanishads are not a book on religion. Upanishads, for example, look at the message given in Upanishad. And there are different types of Upanishads. There are different Upanishad books. For example, that there is a book called Mundak Upanishad, very important, multiple times in many examinations at the center and the state this question has come, that there is a book called the Mundak Upanishad, और इस मुंडक उपनिषद में लिखा हुआ है, what is written below the national emblem of India, Satyamev Jayate. Satyamev Jayate. सत्य में ही जीत है. That in truth lies victory. Right? सत्य में ही जीत है. That is in truth lies victory. Satyameva Jayate. That if you happen to win by forgery, then that is not real victory. Okay, that if you happen to win by forgery, that's not real victory. If you are truthful, that's real victory. That is the message contained in Mundak Upanishad. There are other wise teachings as well. For example, I'm sure at least a good number of us would have heard of a phrase called Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. Suna hai? What is the meaning of the term Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam? Vasudha is earth. So the earth or this entire world is one family. Kutumba is people who are related to each other. Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. That let's not fight. The entire world is one family. Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. That this entire earth, this entire world is one family. Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. Okay. So it is not talking about any religious philosophy. It is only talking about wise teachings. And hence, that Upanishads are actually a book on philosophy. They are a book on philosophy. They are not a book on religion. They are a book on philosophy. Philosophy. Philosophy comes from two words. Phil, sof. Phil का मतलब होता है love. Sof is wisdom. Love for wisdom. So philosophy, that it comprises of all the wise teachings. Now look at the sequence. Initially, that you read the Samhita, you are able to perform the worldly rituals, sacrifices, also perform agriculture, take care of the family. If there is any evil spirit or a charming spirit which is eyeing your family, set your family free from it. Right? Basic ways of worldly life, simplified by the Brahmanas. But then, as Vedic people, as the Aryans believed, or any culture believes, that the ultimate purpose of life is salvation. Salvation. That you free yourself from the bondage of birth, death, birth, death, birth, death. Because most of the cultures of the world, they say, and for example, Gautam Buddha, he explicitly said that world is full of suffering. That means if you are born, you are bound to have suffering. The only way to get rid is you end the cycle of birth and death, which is called as salvation, moksha, enlightenment, nirvana, different words in different culture. Okay. So if you want to attain that moksha, then you will have to set yourself free from the worldly day-to-day things. Worldly day-to-day things. That is how you see that the greatest of the saints or the sages, they have always renounced their family life, lived a life of isolation, and then only they could attain salvation. Right? Then only they could attain salvation. So over here also, that you are expected to now, okay, fine, you have fulfilled your family responsibility. Now go acquire knowledge in isolation, right? In the forest, and then follow the wise teachings of Upanishad. This will help you in attaining the philosophy required to achieve salvation, right? So it's in a connected. So this Vedic philosophy, it moves. It first helps you in fulfilling your filial, matlab family responsibility, then also helps you to attain the higher purposes of life, attaining salvation through wise teachings. So these are the sources of knowledge of Vedic way of life. Now, Vedic way of life. For example, that while talking about these things, they also mention some very important events. For example, say, Rig Veda mein, when Rig Veda is talking about, all the shlokas praising gods and goddesses, but it also mentions some important events. Say, for example, in Rig Veda, that there is a mention of a Das Rajana battle. A Das Rajana battle. What is the meaning of this Das Rajana battle? The battle of 10 kings. Das Rajaon ka battle. The battle of 10 kings is mentioned in Rig Veda. That 10 kings, 5 on one side and 5 on the other side, they were fighting a war. This battle of 10 kings is mentioned in Rig Veda. Okay, so this completes the source of knowledge. Rig Veda was compiled during the early Vedic age. So, whatever we know about the early Vedic age, we know it through this Rig Veda. And later Vedic age, we get to know from where? From Samaveda, Yajurveda, and Atharva Veda. And that is how you see that why life in later Vedic age after 1000 BC, that Aryans got the knowledge of agriculture from Atharva Veda, and after 1000 BC, because Aryans will also benefit from the use of iron, so agricultural productivity will suddenly go up. They are already warriors, they will now have sophisticated weapons, and they are practicing agriculture. If you are practicing agriculture, you want more and more of बोल दो, डरना नहीं है, जोर से. Yes, you said something. Yes, ma'am. No, the one behind you. Huh? Land, right? That you need more and more of land, and therefore that there would be wars for territory, that there would be battle war for territory. Aryans already they were warriors. अब उनको क्या मिल गया? Iron weapon. And if they occupy land, they can practice agriculture because they have knowledge of agriculture, and their agricultural production was shooting up because they are using iron tools. This is how that in later Vedic age, the economic condition of the Aryans, the military power of the Aryans will improve, right? The economic condition, the military power of the Aryans will improve. Okay. In Vedic age, basically we study about the transition in the way of life of the Aryans as they move from the early Vedic age to the later Vedic age. That how their life got transformed as they were moving from early Vedic age to the later Vedic age. Because the life completely changed from early to later Vedic age. And in fact, in UPSC 2024, that there was a question also that discussed the changes or transition in economy and religion from early to later Vedic age. Okay, so whatever I write on the left side of the board, that is for early Vedic age. Whatever I write on the right side will be later Vedic age. Okay. So this early Vedic age and the later Vedic age. This is from 1000 to 600 before Christ, and this is from 1500 or 1600 around to 1000 before Christ. The very first thing, that their geographical location, where they were located. So talking about geography, that their geographical location. The early Aryans, that they come from the northwestern part, they occupy this northwestern region of India. They occupied this northwestern region of India. So they were located in early Vedic age. They were located in the northwest India. In fact, the Rig Veda mentions a term as the home of Aryans. The term is Sapt Sindhava. Sapt Sindhava. Sapt means seven. Sindhu river. Sindhu was the name used by Aryans to denote Indus river. Okay, Indus को हिंदी में आज भी सिंधु बोलते हैं. So basically, this was the land of seven rivers. Land of seven rivers around Indus or Sindhu. Indus or Sindhu. So Sapt Sindhava. What are the seven rivers? Indus itself. In last class, we had studied about its five tributaries, namely Chenab, Jhelum, Satluj, Ravi, and Beas. So 1 plus 5 makes it only 6. What was the seventh river? Saraswati. It is believed that there was a mythological river, or that the river would have dried up in present, because the river is not there at this time. It was believed that Indus plus 5 tributaries that exist today, and another river was there, Saraswati. In fact, the river Saraswati This is mentioned as Nadi Ratna. Ratna is a jewelry. Nadi Ratna, that it was a jewelry amongst all the river. This is considered to be the most pious river, the most pure river. They considered Saraswati as the most pious river. For example, like say at present Aryans would consider that that the river Ganga, Ganges is a very pure river as per the Aryan belief system. But back then, that the river Saraswati was considered to be very pure, the most pious river. There is a reason for it, because there is no author of the Vedas. It is believed, it's a part of the Hindu belief system, that Vedas were never written down by anybody. The Vedic verses were divine revelation. Vedic verses, they were divine revelation. ये reveal हुआ. The Vedic verses descended down from heaven, and these verses were heard by the saints who were sitting on the bank of river Saraswati. And that is why that a belief that, okay, this river is very pure river, because on the river, the heavenly divine words fall down. It's a part of the belief system. So that is why that it is believed that Saraswati was the most pious river. Okay. But which is the river which is most frequently mentioned? The most frequently mentioned river. The most frequently mentioned river, जिसका सबसे ज्यादा नाम आता है in Rig Veda, that means majority of the population must be living over there. That is Sindhu or Indus. That is Sindhu or Indus. And it is because of this reason that the earliest of the scholars, as we saw, were Greeks, that the Greeks were the earliest scholar. And in the Greek alphabet, in the Greek syllable, that the sound S, sir, gets replaced by the sound H, her. है ना? The sound, जैसे होता है ना बहुत सारे लैंग्वेज में, जैसे आप देखेंगे असम में बहुत बार च बोलने की जगह स बोल देते हैं ना. That something that starts with a ch is pronounced as sir, है ना? एक असमीज डायलेक्ट में या लैंग्वेज में वो जो प्रोनाउंसिएशन का तरीका है. So in Greeks also, in Greeks, that when they pronounce or when they write sir s, they replace it with h or her. And this is how that people who lived on the bank of river Sindhu were called as Hindu. Or else that the Vedas does not mention the name Hindu as the name of the religion. It is called as Vedic Brahmanism, those who believe in one universal force, Brahma, the one universal force. That is the name of the religion. But the popular name today, which is Hinduism, it was actually given by the Greeks, because they started calling the people who live on the bank of river Sindhu. They could not pronounce Sindhu as Sindhu. They used to pronounce it as sir, as her, Hindu. और ये बहुत होता है इनफैक्ट इवन इन, कभी किसी को तिनसुखिया को तिनहुकिया बोलते सुना है? हाँ, yes or no? Am I the only one? सुना है ना? So it's the same thing, right? Tinsukhiya as Tinhukiya. In fact, it's there in some of the dialects of Arunachal as well. What I understand that in the Galo dialect, that some of the Galos, they call the wild pig, the wild boar as sor, and some of them as call it as hor. So sir becomes her. Am I correct? The safe choice is to say yes if you don't know, right? So that sir becomes her in many of the dialects of throughout the world. So that is how that Sindhu became Hindu. Are they aware about, say they are living over here, so they are not living on the bank of river Ganges or river Yamuna, but are they aware about river Ganga and Yamuna? Yes. River Ganga and Yamuna are mentioned hardly some couple of times, 1-2 times. They were aware of the river, but they never lived on the bank of river Ganga and Yamuna during the early Vedic age. But they were aware of it. They were aware of it, right? So river Ganga and Yamuna is mentioned just once and twice. That's it. So they knew that there is a river going east, but then they did not live on the bank of the river during early Vedic age. But as they got settled over here, now they started marching eastward. Vedas में एक कहानी लिखी हुई है that a person by the name of Videg Madhav, these things are not important. Anything that is important, I will write on the board. Okay. That a person by the name of Videg Madhav was helped by the god of fire Agni. Aryans were nature worshippers. So they used to worship plants, animals, rivers, mountains, fire. That he was helped by the god Agni, and with the help of the god Agni, that he was able to reach up to East India, that he was able to reach up to a river. The name of the river that they mention is that they reached up to Sadneer. Sadneer. Sad is good, Neer is water, the good river. This basically, this river is a very, very unique river. When you study geography, you know that Pandisa will teach you that what is this uniqueness of this river, because it originates in Nepal Himalayas, right, and then crosses all those difficult terrain and then enters Bihar and then joins river Ganga from the left side. Okay, so its course is very, very unique, that it crosses all those mountain terrains and then it enters into India. So जब आर्यंस बता रहे हैं इस नदी के बारे में कि एक सदनीर रिवर है, today it is easy to understand that this river is nothing but river Gandak, which meets Ganga in Bihar. In Bihar. लेकिन ये कौन सी बैंक, which tributary it is joining? For example, if the river is flowing like this, it is coming from which side? Left side. If you look at the geographical location of Bihar, that Bihar in a sense is divided into two halves by the river Ganges. So the northern part of Bihar was controlled by the Aryans, but southern part of Bihar was not controlled by the Aryans. Northern part, क्योंकि ये northern side तक पहुंचे थे, they could not cross this river Ganges and control the southern part. The northern part was an Aryan land and the southern part was a non-Aryan land. And in fact, because Aryans used to consider the non-Aryans as inferior, and they used to consider themselves as superior. That is how you see that one reason of a very, very strong community caste-based rivalry in the state of Bihar is not of today. It is coming from an age-old this fact in the history, that the northern part, that why Bihar has always been into a social conflict, because the northern part of Bihar was ruled by the Aryans and the southern part of Bihar was ruled by the non-Aryans. So this social conflict, it started very early. The Aryans, they believed that that they are superior. The Aryans had a sense of supremacy. In fact, NCERT writes वो इस सुप्रीमेसी के सेंस को, ताकि हम और आप आराम से समझ पाए, एक एग्जांपल देता है that even today, because the capital city of Patna is in South Bihar, is over here, right on the bank of river Ganga. So obviously most of the population in any state gets concentrated in the capital. So even today, I mean, the things are changing with time, but say old, some people who still, somehow rooted into orthodoxy, if they die on the southern side in the capital city, and if they come from the northern part of Bihar, unka hometown, so they have this wish that they should be cremated where? Because generally in the Hindu belief system that that the dead body is burnt on the bank of a river, so they should be burnt on which side of the river? On the northern, go to the northern side, so that I am cremated on the Aryan land, right? Those who suffer from this orthodoxy, NCERT writes this example that they have a wish to be cremated over here, especially if their native place is on the northern side. Okay. Why? Because this was an Aryan land. So only the northern part of Bihar was captured by the Aryans. और एक्चुअल में क्या हुआ होगा? That Aryans would have set fire to these forests. That is how Vedas write that Vedic Madhav was helped by the god Agni. They would have set fire to, the forests of this Gangetic plain, and hence that he was helped by the god Agni. Okay, so in the early Vedic age, they were concentrated in the northwest part. In the later Vedic age, they came down up to the eastern part of India, but only northern Bihar. Fine. Okay. Talking about their economy. Economy. In the early Vedic age, the primary economic activity, this was cattle rearing. This was cattle rearing. That they were cattle rearers, they were animal grazers. Why? Because they did not have much idea of agriculture. Any agriculture that they practiced was very, very primitive. So their secondary economic activity was agriculture. Again, I'll have to justify whenever I write that why I'm saying that the primary economic activity was cattle rearing and the secondary economic activity was agriculture. Because एग्रीकल्चर, जब भी किसी एग्रीकल्चरल एक्टिविटी या फूड क्रॉप की बात आती है, the Vedas they mention, now all the examples that I write, such details are not asked in exam. I've told you, I will tell you multiple stories, just that you retain the core point. That's it. Vedas, whenever they talk about agriculture, they just mention of one food crop, yav. बार बार सिर्फ एक ही फूड क्रॉप का नाम आता है, यव. Can I switch on one AC at least? Yes or no? No. Okay, which side people? Generally, there is less concentration of people on my left side. So I'd request that from tomorrow, those of you who feel cold on this side, या फिर थोड़ा jacket, रजाई, कंबल जो लेके आना है, because it gets a little suffocating, I guess, right? Or am I the only one who is feeling it? आप लोग कुछ बोलते क्यों नहीं है ऐसा, इतना क्या शर्माना है? Do you also feel suffocated? हाँ? The nose have it. है ना, वो जैसे होता है ना लोकसभा में बोलते हैं ना वॉइस वोटिंग, the nose have it, the nose were very loud. They made sure that कोई AC ऑन नहीं हो, है ना? Okay, never mind. So जब भी किसी एग्रीकल्चरल क्रॉप की बातें आती है, just one name is mentioned, yav. So what could have been the possibility? Either there was only one food crop called yav which was produced, or maybe that there were some 2-3 food crops produced and they were all called by the same name, yav. That's it. That they were all called by the same name which is yav. Okay, यही दो में से एक चीज हो सकता है. But when it comes to cattle rearing, we find that cattle rearing must have been very, very significant to the early Aryans, because most of their terms are rooted in the term gau, guy, cow. And that is why that because Aryans were cattle rearers, that cow became so central to their life. That why cow started to be revered or worshipped amongst the Aryans, because they were cattle rearers. They used to domesticate cows, and this was the main source of their income. This was the main source of their earning. Say for example, a rich person, उसके लिए वेदास में क्या टर्म लिखा हुआ है? गोधन, गोधन या गोमत. धन क्या है? Cow. What is your wealth? Cow. It's very relatable, right? For example, when we traditionally look at the society of Arunachal, that what is wealth? Those who have more number of Mithun or Yak, right? So they are wealthy people. है ना? Traditionally, भले अर्बन एरियाज में आके वो मीनिंग आज चेंज हो गया हो, बट इवन टुडे in the bastis, who is considered as old rich? Even today, those who have more number of animals, right, they would consider themselves to be traditional rich, that they are the old rich. So similarly, that those who, and in fact these terms, if you go to Hindi heartland, right, Hindi heartland, I mean, to me it's easy to relate, because I come from the state of Bihar with South Indian appearance, I know, but still that that these terms are used there even today. कि गांव बस्ती में, गांव में कोई बोलेगा उसको बहुत पैसा हो गया है, तो बोलेगा बहुत बड़ा गोधन हो गया है. Because traditionally this was the word used to denote rich people, कि जिसके पास बहुत ज्यादा गाय है, they are rich people. Okay. The evening time of the day is called as godhuli. Godhuli, right? Animals have early dinner, they go to bed early, सो जाता है जल्दी, because they wake up early. So just a reminder to people कि देख लो गोधुली time हो गया है, take care of the cow, it will sleep in some time. Getting it? Every part, everything. War between two community was called as गवेशना. क्यों? क्योंकि मारपीट करके लास्ट में क्या करना है? एक दूसरे की गाय छीनना है ना? That will, because we will loot each other's cow, we will have more wealth. Gaveshana, Gavishti. Most of the terms, they are centered around Gau. That shows that they were cattle rearers. Fine. But in economy, the use of metal is also important. They used copper. They used copper. They called copper as ajas. Ajas. So they generally had copper-based tools. Copper-based tools. There was no concept of taxation. No taxation existed. But we see that during the early Vedic age, there is mention of a term called Bali. Bali was not a tax. Bali was a voluntary contribution. Voluntary contribution by people to the chief. That means the head of the clan. At times, books tend to call him as king, but technically was not a king. Okay, to the chief. See, early Aryans, they were cattle rearers. So when we study about the society, we will see that they were cattle rearers. They were wandering communities. So generally, that one clan of people, one tribe, one clan, they move together. So the Aryan tribes used to move from one place to another as per their clan. And the head of the clan, in fact, उसका भी नाम पता है, head of the clan कौन, क्या बोलते थे उसको, इस chief को? गोप जनस्य. यहाँ पे भी गौ आ गया. गोप जनस्य. Gop, protector of cow. Jan, people. Jan is people, है ना? जनता, जन, people. So Gop Janasya, protector of people and their cows. King किसको माना जाता था? Protector of people and their cows. The king did not have many privileges, लेकिन king को एक privilege था कि जब भी लड़ाई होगी, and suppose if our clan won, and if I am the Gop Janasya, I am the chief of the clan, then I will decide how many copper utensils to give to whom, how many cows to give to whom, because it is my prerogative, and therefore tomorrow if you come to meet me, you would not like to come and meet me empty handed. आप मेरे लिए क्या लाएगा? कुछ gift. That is voluntary. It was voluntary. The king did not ask for it, and therefore Bali was actually a voluntary gift or a contribution that people brought and gave to the chief. Am I clear? But what happened over here? In the later Vedic age, there was a complete reversal. Aryans learnt agriculture from which book? Atharva Veda. Aryans learnt agriculture from Atharva Veda, and now that practicing agriculture was easy, that they could practice agriculture in a better manner because they had iron agricultural tools. So they started practicing agriculture, and hence now agriculture became primary, and animal rearing became secondary. That cattle rearing, this became a secondary activity. Okay, that cattle rearing became a secondary activity. Fine. That cattle rearing, it became a very secondary activity. How can I say? Because suddenly we see in agriculture, यव, बेसिकली यव का मतलब अब हो जा रहा था बार्ली. बार्ली के लिए यव यूज किया गया, राइस के लिए व्रीही यूज किया गया, wheat के लिए गोधूम यूज किया गया. So we find the mention of different agricultural crops. And how am I saying कि भाई व्रीही राइस ही था? Because जो वो व्रीही का डिस्क्रिप्शन दे रहे हैं वो राइस से मिलता जुलता है. So we see a variety of crops being named in the later Vedic age that shows that people were cultivating a variety of crops far more than the early Vedic age, right? And hence we can say that agriculture actually improved, and we have reasons to believe because agricultural knowledge was present in Atharva Veda. So obviously their knowledge increased and their ability to practice agriculture increased because now they were using iron tools, right? Now they were using iron tools. That is why. Fine. So initially जब agriculture हुआ होगा तो it will be subsistence agriculture. अभी वो धीरे धीरे फिर agricultural production बढ़ना शुरू होगा. It did not attain surplus agriculture for a long time, and that is why the Vedic civilization is a rural civilization. It's not an urban civilization. Trade and commerce तभी होगा ना जब हम surplus में produce करेंगे. That during Vedic civilization, the production was not in surplus, and hence it was a rural civilization. Am I clear? That it was a rural civilization. Okay. Talking about the metals, it used iron. Because iron is a dark colored metal, therefore it was called as Shyam. Shyam matlab dark. It was also called Krishna because Krishna is dark in color. So it was called as Shyam or Krishna Ayas. That is Shyam Ayas या Krishna Ayas. उसका नाम था iron का. Okay. Now see, if we are cattle rearing society, and because war was the norm, people used to fight either for cattle or now people will fight for agricultural crop. War was the norm. If we are a nomadic society, if we are a society of cattle rearers, then in that case we have two options. Either we fight, or if we are afraid, we will run away with our cattle. But over here, that people will have to settle down at a place where they are practicing agriculture, at least for that much period of time. Yes or no? So a settled way of life started over here. A more settled way of life started over here, that people started settling down at the place. But what difficulty came, that now in case of war, you cannot run away, you have to fight, you have to somehow protect your agricultural land, or else your harvest, your crop will be harvested by somebody else. You will have nothing to eat. And hence came the concept of territory. कि ये मेरा जगह है, ये मेरा मिट्टी है, हम यहाँ खेती करेगा, and it is our nation, our country. Till now over here we hear multiple times the word jan, 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 people. क्या important है? लोग important है ना? Because एक source of power ये भी है. The communities, the clans which have high population are considered to be powerful, right? So वहां पर powerful वो थे जिनके पास लोग ज्यादा थे. तो यहां पर ज्यादा टर्म क्या रहा है? जन, जन, जन. But now over here the territory became very important, and for the first time you find words like janpad. Janpad पद is feet. That जहां पर मैंने अपना feet रख दिया, जनपद, that territory is mine. Now I have to protect the territory. Protecting territory, because territory is immovable, it cannot move, is very, very difficult. To protect your territory, you need to be powerful. To protect people, either you are powerful or you find a shelter. है ना? You find a shelter, आप कहीं जाके छुप जाइए, you will be able to protect yourself. But then to protect territory, you have to be powerful. And that is why that there came a demand that our chief should not be just a gopajanasya, capable of protecting people and the cattle, but should be capable of protecting the land, the agricultural field, the agricultural harvest as well. Now people wanted the same chief to be very, very powerful, capable of protecting the agricultural field. If the chief has to protect the agricultural field, in that case, that the chief must have a strong army, military. But to maintain a strong army and military, you require money. And therefore, if I am the king, if I'm maintaining an army to protect your agricultural land, I need money for it. So I will ask you to pay tax. So I will ask you to pay tax. That is why that the concept of taxation started. Am I clear? That is why the concept of taxation started. Okay. So remember, when you go back home, whenever you read a word, do think why it happened, how it happened. Try to recall the stories of the class. Okay. एक बार आप उस तरीके से पढ़ेगा, दिमाग में बैठ जाएगा. Okay. नहीं तो फिर again the same myth of history बहुत ज़्यादा है, याद करना पड़ता है. If you just keep on following with the pace of the class, focusing on some of the stories, it will go in your head. And hence started the need for a stronger state, led to that now for the first time we see taxation starting. Taxation. What was the first tax? The tax was called as bhag. Bhag. क्योंकि उस समय कैश तो होता नहीं था, करेंसी होता नहीं था. So whatever was produced by the farmers, a part of the produce, the king will say, give it to me, so that I will use this food crop to feed my army. Right? I will use this food crop to feed my army. Bhag was nothing but a share of crop produce. A share of crop produce. This was called as bhag. A share of crop produce was called as bhag. Generally, it was somewhere around, say, 1/12 to 1/6 of the crop produce. That was the bhag. So now, is it not that more the agricultural production, the king will get more tax? Yes or no? If I am taking 10% of your agricultural produce, if you produce 10 kg, I will just get 1 kg. If you produce 100 kg, I'm getting 10 kg, right? So more the crop production, more the tax that the king will get. So even the king was interested. Even the king was very much interested in increasing the crop production, and therefore the king started extending some facility to the farmers. तो ताकि उसका crop production बढ़ेगा, the king will get more and more tax. And hence the king started providing irrigation facility. अगर dry area है तो वहां एक pond construct करा देगा, so that people can draw water. Irrigation facility. But now because the king is providing irrigation facility, so again you will have to pay some extra money. For example, today the government takes tax from us to provide some basic infrastructure, but then जहां एक अच्छा रोड ना बनाया उसके ऊपर क्या लगा देता है? टोल टैक्स. है ना, कि अगर ये यूज करना है रोड, you will have to pay a toll tax. So something similar to that, that when the government provided some additional facility, it charged an additional fee, which was called as shulk. Even today, fee is called shulk. This was an additional fee. An additional fee that had to be paid. Why? Because for using some extra services provided by the state. For using some extra services provided by the state. But do we see Bali over here? Yes, Bali continued. But remember, Bali was not a tax. Over here, Bali became a customary contribution. Bali, it became a customary contribution. It was not a voluntary contribution, it was a customary contribution. If you want to understand the difference between the two, that what is the difference between a voluntary and a customary contribution? It's something like, suppose that, say, at this stage of life, if you are going to, suppose, आज आपको किसी दोस्त ने बुलाया कि आज मेरा बर्थडे है, बर्थडे पार्टी में आना, or maybe I don't know what is the culture at present. Do you guys carry gift to your birthday, to the friend's birthday party? Everyone? No भी है, चलो तब मेरा एक example valid है. So some of you are nodding yes, some of you are like take it easy, it's all right, है ना? अभी तो student है, अभी क्यों gift लेके जाना? That means it's more of voluntary, right? It's your wish. It's more of voluntary. Suppose tomorrow, you get into a job, you enter a family life after 10 years, the same friend calls you for a birthday party at home. It's not that he has told ki come to my birthday party with a gift, but the social custom says that as a family, you are going to meet somebody's family for their birthday party, then probably you need to carry a gift. That's the social custom. So that is a customary contribution. If you don't do that, it's not that you will not be offered food, but then you will be criticized. So over here also, it was not a tax. The king was not asking people to come with bali, but it had now become almost a custom कि king के पास जा रहा है तो कुछ ना कुछ तो लेके जाएगा ही जाएगा. Why? Because the king is protecting our agricultural land. But remember, at no point of time bali was a tax. Am I clear? Some important things that during the later Vedic age, we find terms like Janapad, we find terms like Rashtra, that this is my country. The concept of territory started. The improvement in economy resulted into the demand for a stronger political power. Yes or no? That now there was a demand for a stronger political power. So let's now compare the polity from early Vedic age to the later Vedic age. That how politics changed. Polity. Over here, who was my king? The head was a Gopajanasya. The head was Gopajanasya, meaning protector of people and their cattle. Protector of people and cattle. Right? The king was a Gopajanasya, protector of people and their cattle. Now, this Gopajanasya, he was actually assisted by a Purohit. Purohit is a priest जो बताएगा कौन सा रिचुअल करना है, कैसा सैक्रिफाइस करना है for the betterment of the clan. Okay. And he was also assisted by a Senani, a military commander. Okay. The Gopajanasya was not absolutely powerful. उसका बस एक ही privilege होता था that after winning the battle, it will be the Gopajanasya who will decide that how much of the war proceeds. जो भी हमने जीता है, how much of the war proceed will be distributed to whom all. That's it. उसका बस एक ही decision होता था. So he was not all powerful, that he was always dependent upon the tribal councils. That the tribal councils were powerful, decision making authority lied with the tribal councils. For example, the tribal council of Sabha, The tribal council of Sabha, that Sabha, which was the General Assembly, it decided on day-to-day administrative and judicial matters. Day-to-day administration and judicial matter, it was decided by Sabha. Next was the Samiti. In the Samiti, the king had to enjoy majority support. Very important. The king had to enjoy the majority support in Samiti. That means, can the Samiti change the king or not? Yes, because if the king does not enjoy majority support in Samiti, then the king can be replaced, the king can be changed. So, Samiti had the power to replace the king. The king must enjoy the majority support of the Samiti. Third was the most ancient, the age-old tribal institution, Vidhata. Vidhata is the one who decides. Vidhata is the one who decides. So all the important decisions were always taken by Vidhata. All the important decisions were always taken by Vidhata. So Vidhata was the one who decides. So all the important decisions, they were taken by Vidhata. And this was the oldest tribal institution. Vidhata was the oldest tribal institution. And then there was a fourth institution called Gan. Gan is all the people put together. All the people put together, they were called as Gan. So everyone, the entire, for example, today if you see in our Panchayati Raj institutions, that there is a term called Gram Sabha. Gram Sabha kya hai? All the adult population of the village is Gram Sabha. So similarly, all the people put together were called as Gan. In fact, during the early Vedic age, when we study the society, we will see that even that there was a great degree of gender equality, because that women were a part of Sabha as well as Vidhata. Women were not a part of Samiti, but women used to sit on Sabha as well as Vidhata. These were the tribal institutions which were very, very powerful. Why? Because the king was just expected to lead the clan in war and perform the rituals on behalf of the clan. Further, the Gopajanasya, or the king, just had one privilege, that of all the things that were won in the war, he will decide that how much of amount will be given to which person of the clan. So this was not a very powerful institution. So some question. So tell me, in early Vedic age, kingship was hereditary, true or false? False. Kingship is not hereditary because the king was decided by the Samiti. So remember that over here, that kingship is not hereditary. No hereditary kingship. But what happened? As we are moving from early Vedic age to later Vedic age, so geographically, people came up to East India. Economically, they became more prosperous, and economic prosperity needed to be protected. Agricultural land needed to be protected, and for that reason, that there was a need for a stronger king. There was a need for a stronger king, and hence the king became powerful. And hence the king became powerful, right? What happens when individuals become too powerful? When individuals become too powerful, the other institutions, they become weak or they become powerful? Weak always, yes or no? Say for example, if you look at the Indian politics or the Indian government over a period of time, say for example in the mid 1970s, that there was a strong individual leading the country, right? In the mid 1970s, that a strong individual was leading the country, and hence that emergency was imposed, and we see that the state institutions fell very weak. They could not prevent they could not prevent that individual from imposing emergency. Yes or no? Similarly, today, that when we see that a strong individual is leading the country, right, that some sections of the society, they have, they have this apprehension, of fear, that probably that all the institutions are weak, inferior in front of that individual. Yes or no? Yes or no? नहीं, मैं आपका political opinion आपका है. I am just teaching in a very neutral manner. That is why I said some people have this opinion. All of you may not have this opinion, right? That today, when a strong individual is leading the country, there is a fear, there is an apprehension that all the other state institutions are are falling weak in front of the authority, in front of the power of that individual. So whenever individuals become too powerful, institutions become weak. Whenever individuals become too powerful, the institutions become weak. This is what happened over here. The king deliberately wanted that, let's suppress the authority of the tribal institutions. This is the right time. People want the king to be powerful, that in the name of having a strong state, let me take more power in my own hand. क्योंकि लोग खुश थे, क्योंकि राजा पावरफुल होगा, मिलिट्री पावरफुल होगी, तो उनका खेत बच जाएगा, उनका एग्रीकल्चरल लैंड सेफ रहेगा. So, to ensure this, that what the king did, that the king usurped, छीन लिया सारा power, अपने हाथ में लिया, and the powers of the tribal institutions, they were reduced. And what is the best way to increase your power? One of the time-tested, easy way to increase your power. Sorry? To increase, you are powerful, that is why you can collect tax. Getting it? How to become powerful? Okay, military, good. Okay. Which power is very, very difficult to be challenged? You can challenge political power. The biggest of the political powers have fallen flat. In fact, you see recently that this Gen Z generation, which is otherwise believed to be irresponsible, I'm not saying, right? That the Gen Z generation, which is otherwise believed to be irresponsible, you see the Gen Zs of Nepal, falling their government flat on its nose, right? And that too literally, नाक पे मुक्का मार रहा है मिनिस्टर को, वीडियो आ रहा था. So they forced they brought the government to a halt end. So the biggest of the political powers have been challenged easily. बड़ा बड़ा वर्ड सब क्यों यूज करता है क्लास में, है ना? Which power, जिसके अगेंस्ट मेरे मन में शायद कुछ हो भी, लेकिन बोलने में एकदम बहुत डर लगेगा. हाँ, मनी. पब्लिक सपोर्ट तो बहुत ही सब छोटा मोटा चीज है ये. सारे मनी, अपना सारा पैसा लेके आप उसके चरणों में जाके डाल देते हैं. दैट इज the religious power, right? God, religion. Power of religious institution, very rarely. The last big example was the Renaissance in Europe, 14th century. The power of religious institutions, they are almost, unquestionable. And that is how that there was always a divine theory of kingship. क्योंकि जब तक लोग ये नहीं बिलीव करेंगे that my king has divine power, है ना, वो किंग को किंग नहीं मानेंगे, कोई ना कोई उठ के उसको हटाने के लिए बोलेगा. Either the king should be very powerful, so that the king is able to suppress any rebellion in the kingdom, or the king enjoys the view that the king has some divine power, and therefore often that there is a strong understanding, or at times a nexus between politics and religion, right? ट्रेडिशनली क्या होता था, रिलीजियस इंस्टीट्यूशंस, उनका टैक्स वेव ऑफ कर दिया जाता था, एंड रिलीजियस इंस्टीट्यूशंस यूज्ड टू सपोर्ट द पॉलिटिकल पावर. देयर इज ऑलवेज अ स्ट्रॉन्ग नेक्सस बिटवीन रिलीजन एंड पॉलिटिक्स. a strong nexus between religion and politics. And for that reason, that when the king became powerful, the easiest way was through the divine theory of kingship. So what happened? That king became powerful and kingship got associated with rituals. Kingship got associated with rituals, rituals and sacrifices, so that the king is able to make people believe that, look, I have performed such a ritual, I have offered this sacrifice, now the gods and goddesses are happy with me, they have blessed me to rule you all. For example, some of the rituals, the Rajasuya Yagya. राजसूय यज्ञ, ज्ञ को इंग्लिश में JNA लिखते हैं, तो वो पढ़ने में लगेगा यज्ञ, बट इट्स यज्ञ. ओके, द राजसूय यज्ञ, दिस वाज द कोरोनेशन सेरेमनी. कोरोनेशन, दैट मीन्स जब किंग को किंग बनाया जा रहा है, कोरोनेशन किया जा रहा है, तो एक बहुत बड़ा यज्ञ परफॉर्म करेगा, गिविंग अ मैसेज दैट, लुक, आई हैव रिसीव्ड द ब्लेसिंग फ्रॉम गॉड टू रूल यू ऑल. राइट. देन अश्वमेध भी आएगा. वाजपेय यज्ञ. Vajpayee Yagya. This was a chariot race that the king's chariot used to win in a race by leaps and bounds, बहुत margin से, to show that, look, that anything that pertains to the king is very powerful. Chariot race. And then what somebody said, the Ashwamedh Yagya. Ashwamedh Yagya, which is horse sacrifice. The Ashwamedh Yagya, which is horse sacrifice. So suppose if I am the king, I will ask my royal horse to run. क्यों? क्योंकि किस चीज का कॉन्सेप्ट आ गया लेटर वैदिक एज में? जनपद, राष्ट्र. To demarcate the territory of my janpad, to demarcate the territory of my rashtra, because the concept of janpad and rashtra came, that I will ask the royal horse to run. Suppose पहले घोड़ा दौड़ते दौड़ते चला गया गुवाहाटी, तो यहां से गुवाहाटी is my area. वहां से आगे गया बंगाल, बंगाल में somebody stopped the horse, so that means the person has invited a war with me, right? A war with me. Now I will go, I will fight war. If I win, and if I want to occupy more territory, right, then suppose if the horse runs up to Bihar, and then I feel that, okay, this is enough a territory for me to rule, then I will sacrifice the horse and declare that my Janapad starts from Itanagar to Bihar. Okay. So this was called as the Ashwamedh Yagya, the horse sacrifice. Okay. And what happened? The powers of the tribal councils, they got reduced. In fact, what happened? That Vidhata was abolished because it was the oldest tribal institution. So Vidhata got abolished. Vidhata got abolished. And Sabha and Samiti, basically because with the help of the priest, the king, with the help of the priest, the king performed rituals and sacrifices which bestowed, which gave divine power to the king. So now the king allowed the priest to capture these tribal councils. So now Sabha and Samiti, that these two were hijacked by Brahmins. Okay. Sabha and Samiti were hijacked by the Brahmins. Because with the help of the priest, the king acquired divine power. They performed these rituals. So now kingship will be hereditary or not hereditary? Mostly it was hereditary in some of the areas, but at least the concept of a hereditary king started. The concept of a hereditary king started. Yes, in some of the areas that kingship was still not hereditary, but the concept of a hereditary king, it started. So the political institutions, the tribal institutions, they lost their significance and the king became all powerful. Why? Because people were okay with a strong king who will be capable of protecting their agricultural land. In fact, that later, the Brahmins declared that Sabha and Samiti, basically these two were the tribal institutions, they are named after the two daughters of a creator god. And therefore, anything that pertains to God, that only the Brahmins can be a part of it. Okay, next, the society. Society. Now, when we talk about the society of early Vedic age, we see that there were different social institutions mentioned. For example, that one of the type of social division which was mentioned was that the most basic unit of society was the kul. कुल का मतलब क्या हुआ? लीनिएज. कुल, लीनिएज. एक कुल के जगह एक कुल के लोग एक साथ वैंडर करते थे. कुल इज लीनिएज and the kul was headed by a kulappa or a kulpati. By a kulappa or kulpati. Some 2-3 kul or clan lineage will come together to form a gram, a village. And the gram was headed by a gramini, the head of the village. Some gram put together, that this was called a vishay. It was headed by a vishapati. And the vis or the vishay put together form the entire population jan. The jan was headed by Rajan the king. और राजन को क्या बोला जाता था? गोपजनस्य. The Rajan was called as Gopajanasya. Gopajanasya. Not important, just remember that Kul was the most basic unit of society. Just एक चीज याद रखना, that Kul was the most basic unit of society. That means the society was based on kinship. Kinship. Kinship होता है ना, for example, say in tribal societies, the societies are based on kinship, right? So kinship, Kinship, kinship. That the head of the clan will be heading only their own clan. But kingship is very different. A king does not just head one clan or community. The king is the head of the area, so heads all the people living in the area, irrespective of their clan, irrespective of their community, right? There are other social systems mentioned as well. For example, बिल्कुल शुरुआत में, I'm just taking you through chronology. जो important रहेगा, I will keep on telling you. Just remember that the basic unit of the society was kul and the society was based on kinship. जो लोग एक clan के हैं वो एक साथ रहते थे, है ना? For example, say in the urban places, is the society based on kinship? No. The person living next or just below your flat is not your relative necessarily, right? So urban societies are not based on kinship. Okay. We find names of some other social groups as well. For example, Aryan, Das, दस्यु, पानी. ऐसा नाम दिखता है बहुत बार इन ऋग्वेदा. आर्यन, दास, दस्यु, पानी. Aryan, obviously people, the Aryan civilization, those who thought that they are of noble origin. There is often a big conflict between Aryan and Dasyu. For example, in Rig Veda, there are multiple mentions of Dasyu Hatya. There are multiple mentions of Dasyu Hatya, and therefore probably that the Dasyus were the indigenous people of the land who were fighting to stop the advancement of the Aryans, that who were fighting against the Aryans, that let Aryans not capture our territory, and therefore that there was always a war or a conflict between the two. And Aryan and Dasyu, this conflict, it shows that probably Dasyus were that Dasyus, they were indigenous people. Pani, they were cattle traders. Panis were cattle traders, and many a times that they used to face this hate of the people, anger of the people, क्योंकि किसी का भी cattle चोरी हो जाता था, तो उनको क्या लगता था? That the Panis must have stolen my cattle and sold it. In fact, one of the biggest crime in early Vedic age was cattle lifting. If you steal somebody's cattle lifting, that was a big crime in the early Vedic age. Okay, it attracted huge punishment. Okay, we find the mention of the term Varna, but the earliest meaning of the term Varna, it has been used in the sense of complexion. Complexion, which is the color of the skin. Color of skin. The Aryans, they were fairer in complexion compared to the indigenous people of the Great Northern Plain. Great Northern Plain, the Indus, जो Yamuna Ganga का जो plain है, that Aryans were fairer in complexion compared to the indigenous people of the Great Northern Plain, and probably because of that, that Varna initially was a distinction based on color, but later that the meaning of Varna changed, that there was a fourfold Varna division, a fourfold Varna division. This was presented in, very important, in the Purushukta hymn. In the Purushukta hymn, in the 10th mandal of Rig Veda, in the 10th mandal of Rig Veda, RV Rig Veda, that there is a hymn called Purushukta hymn. It talks about the fourfold Varna division, that there are four Varnas, namely the Brahmins, the Kshatriyas, the Vaishyas, and the Shudras. In fact, this Purushukta hymn, ये Purushukta hymn बोलता है that there is a creator god called Prajapati. ये hymn जो संस्कृत का hymn है, it says that there is a creator god called Prajapati, and from the head of the creator god came out Brahmins, from the shoulder of the creator god came out the Kshatriyas, from the thighs of the creator god came out the Vaishyas, and from the feet of the creator god came out the Shudras. The supporters of Varna system, they say that all the four parts are the four parts of a body. Without any part, that the body would not function properly, and therefore it is not a discriminatory system. The critiques of Varna system say that it was basically done to show a hierarchy, that Brahmins are higher as compared to the Kshatriyas, in turn higher than the Vaishyas and the Shudras, that this was a discriminatory system which defeats the idea that all the creation is equal, that the entire creation is equal, that it defeats the idea that it was inherently discriminatory in nature. And if you look at it, that obviously over a period of time, that the Varna system became very, very discriminatory in nature. that the Varna system became very discriminatory in nature. But at this point of time, the Varna system, this fourfold Varna system, this was based on this was based on karma or action. I am not saying that it was very, very fluid, but Rig Veda does mention of many episodes wherein the father is a Vaishya because the father does trade and commerce. But the son acquired Vedic knowledge, and because the son acquired Vedic knowledge, so was called a Brahmin. Right? Was called a Brahmin. That means that it was based on karma or action that a person performed, and hence this system was flexible. This system was flexible and mobile. It was not a very rigid system. The system was flexible and mobile. Clear? That anybody who acquired Vedic knowledge and helps other in performing their rituals and sacrifices will be called as Brahmin. And Brahmins, because they had knowledge, so that they do not become arrogant, it was made mandatory upon them that they cannot earn any money. They have to beg and eat so that they never become arrogant. है ना कि हमारे पास knowledge है, so they were asked to beg and eat. The Kshatriyas, they were expected to be warriors and protect the people. Those who did trade and commerce, they were called as Vaishyas, and those who supported the others with manual work, manual labor, they were called as Shudras. Right? They were called as Shudras. And this was a flexible, to an extent, it was flexible and mobile because one's action or karma, it determined their varna. But over a period of time, obviously, that if you see that anybody who has knowledge gets more recognition and respect, those who have power, they get recognition and respect, those who have wealth, money, Vaishyas, they get recognition and respect. And for that reason, that there was continuous oppression of the Shudras. Those who had knowledge, they kept on restricting their knowledge only among themselves. Right? Only among themselves. For example, that Sanskrit was not the common man's language. Sanskrit was the language of the upper elites. Upper elites. And that is why जब वेदास की ऑर्थोडॉक्सी, जब हिंदू सोसाइटी में बहुत ऑर्थोडॉक्सी आ गया, डिस्क्रिमिनेशन आ गया, and therefore when learned people like Gautam Buddha and Mahavir Jain wanted people to learn, to have knowledge, not to be driven by blind faith, by Vedic orthodoxy, they started preaching people in which language? Not in Sanskrit, in Pali, in Prakrit. These were the languages understood by common people because the Brahmins were preaching in Sanskrit. Ordinary people, their language was not Sanskrit. So knowledge got contained only amongst the Brahmins, the upper section of society, those who understood, those who spoke Sanskrit fluently. Say, for example, today, I know that this example may not be very relatable in the state of Arunachal Pradesh because, we have done our education in English medium throughout. But I'm sure that, with such a long boundary with Assam, that you would know that even till today, for example, in the schools of Assam, that the early education, maths, say science, etc., is taught in which language? Assamese. But do you know any good book for preparing for IIT or medical entrance exam or civil services in Assamese language? Right. So somebody who is wonderful in studies till class 10th suddenly has such a big struggle in life only because good resources are not available in the local dialect. So some people can do all the chest thumping कि हम ऐसे बचाएगा अपना language बचाएगा etc. But are you really focusing on the core issue? That are you providing opportunity? There is so much around, especially with the language of Hindi at a national level. But do you really have good books in Hindi for say for preparing for? Do you have an engineering course in Hindi in the country? No. So in the name of some that linguistic nationalism, you can do all the chest thumping, है ना, छाती पीट पीट के रो सकते हैं कि हमको हिंदी को बचाना है, ये करना है, वो करना है, या कोई भी लैंग्वेज को, by the supporters of, by, people of that language. But how will you protect language? The only way is to provide opportunity in that language, or else we will always chase. Why are we chasing English today? Because English is a language of opportunity. Yes or no? As simple as that. It's not that you and I, we don't like to, speak new languages or learn new languages or take pride in our own language. But then, it's important to learn English because it's a language of opportunity. Back then, that Sanskrit was not known to the common masses, and the Brahmins were preaching only in Sanskrit. So knowledge got restricted only to the upper section of society. And that is why a Gautam Buddha and a Mahavir Jain started preaching in Pali and Prakrit, so that वो knowledge आम आदमी को भी मिल सके, right? तो क्या होगा? That only the Brahmins will acquire that knowledge, only the Kshatriyas acquired warrior-like skill. So over a period of time, this fourfold Varna division will be based on birth. It will become rigid. It will become very, very, it will become immobile. It will become fixed and rigid. Fine? Okay. So first, iska comparison dekh lete hain, that in later Vedic age, what happened? That this Varna system, this was based on birth, and therefore it became rigid and fixed. That this became rigid and fixed because it was based on birth. Okay. Now over here, if we look at the position of women, the position of women in the Vedic society, that there was by and large gender equality, or at least we can say that there was absence of gender discrimination. The only discrimination as per NCERT was that the birth of a girl child was not celebrated. Birth of a girl child was not celebrated, but once the girl child was born, that there was no discrimination, there was no distinction between a boy and a girl. But yes, if you ask an expecting couple, right, that what do you want, they will have a preference for a male child. But if a girl child is born, that they will not discriminate against it. It was not celebrated, but then she will have the same opportunity. For example, that the girls got married only after attaining the age of biological maturity, that is after attaining the age of puberty. That girls had access to education, they had the right to choose their groom. अब देखो अगर वो महाभारत रामायण ये सब टीवी सीरियल अगर देखा है, क्या होगा? All the eligible bachelors, they are standing in a row, right? And the girl passes by, and it is her decision whom she wants to marry. So that's what is called Swayamvar. Swayam, self, Var is the groom. Swayamvar, right to choose the groom. So that shows the equal status of woman, that she is getting the right to choose her groom. So by and large, there was gender equality. The only possible discrimination was that the birth of a girl child was not celebrated, but once born, she had equal access to all the opportunities. Clear? But as we move to the later Vedic age, we see that the Varna system became very rigid, fixed, that there was a sharp deterioration in the status of women and Shudras. The Brahmins, they came out with orthodox systems, because now they are controlling Sabha and Samiti, right? They are controlling the tribal councils. So they came out with orthodox systems. For example, they came out with a principle of pollution and purity. wherein they declared women and Shudras to be polluted. That women and Shudras to be polluted. In fact, they came out with a principle of purity and pollution. They declared women and Shudras to be polluted. In fact, women and Shudras did not have the right. Women and Shudras did not have the right to listen to the Vedic chant. Women and Shudras did not have the right to listen to the Vedic chants. So suppose if this is a if this is a later Vedic age, and if I happen to be a woman or a Shudra, and there is a Vedic chanting going on in this class, then I will be asked to go out. Those who offered manual labor to the other three varnas, है ना, ये जो चार वर्ण आए, right? Brahmins who acquired Vedic knowledge, Kshatriyas who were warriors, Vaishyas who did trade and commerce, and Shudras those who did manual labor, है ना, जो manual work करते थे. Okay, so their status, it completely declined, deteriorated. So such discriminatory system came. The Brahmins, to show that they are pure, they started putting on a sacred thread around their torso, a sacred thread, है ना? But women and Shudras were not allowed to put on that sacred thread. So the status of women and Shudra declined. In fact, they were not met with a dignified treatment, that their dignity of life was not respected. They were not allowed to even listen to the Vedic chants. They were considered to be polluted. Okay, they were considered to be polluted. So in this background, at least some women, so women will not have access to education, yes or no? But then some women who got educated, let's note down their name. Some educated women, Gargi, Maitri, Lopamudra, Katyayani. Gargi, Maitri, Lopamudra, and Katyayani. Their names are important because otherwise women did not have access to education. But now some women, they became educated. Right? Some women became educated. Okay. Say other things. With regard to other forms of social discrimination or some orthodox social systems, there came, so some social orthodoxy started. So we see the starting of Gotra system. Gotra, again, cow. Gotra mein kya belief tha? That, and again, you'll find many of the things relatable. The institutions which are similar to the traditional institutions that have existed in Arunachal as well, but obviously by a different name. That Gotra system, it was believed that the creator God sent some sages on earth, and whatever world population that you have today is the lineage of those sages. So suppose a particular sage, and this is his family tree. So that means a boy and a girl in this entire lineage, what will be their relation? Brother, sister. In the same generation, they will be brother and sister. So Gotra endogamy. Endogamy is marriage within the same. Gam is marriage. Endo is within. So Gotra endogamy will be banned. Gotra endogamy was a punishable offense. Gotra endogamy was a punishable offense, that Gotra endogamy was banned. Only Gotra exogamy can be done. Okay. Gotra endogamy was banned. Gotra exogamy can be done. So at times, whenever you have such social systems, so these social systems, that they appear to be orthodox, right? So such orthodox social systems were brought, were brought, thereby, that the social orthodoxy kept on increasing. Say some other example, not very important. Now coming to early Vedic age. Early Vedic age में there is often a term seen which is called as niyog. Niyog का मतलब क्या होता था? That suppose if a woman, who becomes a widow at a very early age, and she doesn't have a family, then she was allowed to have family, most likely with the brother of the deceased husband, for the purpose of having a family life. This institution was not seen with disrespect. इसको खराब नहीं माना जाता था. But over here, that niyog will be seen with disrespect. That niyoga was not seen with respect. Say, for example, in fact, this term niyoga, this practice of niyoga has continued to exist for a very long period of time, till very recent past also. Just that people don't talk about it openly, right? That many a times, that especially that in the rural societies, there is a practice that if there is a young childless widow, right, and if the younger brother, like suppose an unmarried brother is there in the family, then the woman is married to the brother of the deceased husband for the purpose of having a family, right? But then over a period of time, these institutions, they were seen with disrespect. Okay, so this completes the society of the Vedic age. The last, which is religion. So the early Vedic people, they had the purpose of their religion. Purpose was material welfare. The purpose of religion was material welfare, that we should get more and more of material, more agricultural produce, more harvest. So we should get more material. The purpose of religion was material welfare. And from where did they derive all their material welfare? From nature. And that is why that they worshipped nature, that nature worship was the norm. Nature worship. However, they had a unique thing, which was that they personified the forces of nature, that they practiced personification of forces of nature, as if the forces of nature, they were a human being as well. For example, who was the most important god during the Indus Valley civilization end? I had said कि मैं नाम इसलिए नहीं लिख रहा हूं क्योंकि मैं बाद में लिखूंगा. The one who was believed to be the destroyer of fort, Purandhar. Purandhar. Basically, Indra, who is the god of rain, was called as Purandhar. Indra was the most important god. He was the god of rain, and he was called as Purandhar. What is the meaning of Purandhar? Destroyer of forts. Forts. Destroyer of forts. The second most important god was Agni, the god of fire, so on and so forth. There were female goddesses as well. For example, Usha, Aditi. Usha, Aditi, they were female goddesses as well. So the purpose of religion was very, very simple, material welfare. And that is why that people used to offer sacrifice, cattle sacrifice, that look, I'm sacrificing my cattle to make you happy. Next year, give me more cattle, give me more agricultural produce, give me more harvest. It was a nature worshipping culture, a simple nature worshipping culture. But then over a period of time, in later Vedic age, because people already achieved material welfare, so they started chasing some very abstract thing. For example, the purpose of religion changed to salvation. The purpose of religion, it changed to salvation. It changed to salvation. Salvation क्या है? Getting rid of this cycle of birth, death, birth, death. Why? Because if I am born, I am bound to have suffering. If I am born, I am bound to have suffering. And therefore, that people wanted to cancel, to get rid of the cycle of birth and death. Now, these are not very tangible things. Tangible समझते हैं, जिसको छू सकते हैं, जिसको देख सकते हैं. ये मुझे पता नहीं चलेगा, मेरा मटेरियल वेलफेयर हुआ या नहीं, ये मुझे पता चलेगा, राइट? मैंने कोई रिचुअल सैक्रिफाइस किया, now I will check next year whether I'm earning more or not, whether I've got more material or not, material welfare. But then this idea common people will not have. Who will have this idea? The priest. And therefore, that they started depending upon the priest, the Brahmins, and hence the Brahmanical supremacy, the Brahmanical orthodoxy. That Brahmanical orthodoxy increased. The Brahmins, they started asking for more and more, donations, more and more animal sacrifice to the temple. Then only that you give me your most prized possession, sacrifice animal, and then we will help you attain salvation, right? That then we will help you attain salvation. That was the Brahmanical orthodoxy, that they started asking for more donations, more contribution. The Brahmanical orthodoxy, because Brahmins in this period, they were also controlling Sabha and Samiti. Sabha and Samiti. Why? Because they said that there is a creator god whose name was Prajapati, who had sent sages, right? And Sabha and Samiti are the daughters. So ये institutions किसके नाम पर है? Named after the daughters of the creator god. And when they hijacked Sabha and Samiti, now Sabha and Samiti mein, they will come out with certain rules and regulations. So king will not like it. King सोच रहा है मैं अपने मर्जी से रूल करूं. But when Brahmins started dictating certain rules and regulations, that look, you need to work as per dharma. That you need to work as per dharma. So these are the rules and regulations that you need to follow. So the Kshatriyas, the kings, they did not like it. So in fact, Brahmanical orthodoxy was interfering into the politics of Kshatriyas. क्यों? क्योंकि tribal institutions सभा और समिति में बैठकर the Brahmins were making rules and regulations which at times curtailed the power of the king. And the Brahmanical orthodoxy was hurting the economic interest of the Vaishyas. It was hurting the economic interest of the Vaishyas, because the Brahmins are asking that if you want salvation, give me your cattle, sacrifice your cattle. So it was asking for, the Brahmanical orthodoxy was compelling people, forcing people to sacrifice their cattle. And therefore, it was an economic loss to the Vaishyas. And the Brahmanical orthodoxy took away the dignity of life from Shudras and women. So the Brahmanical orthodoxy, it did not give a dignified way of life to women and Shudras, that they were called as polluted. So if I don't get respect, if I don't get dignity in my own culture, obviously that I will look for any other culture. And for the Vaishyas, that their economic interest was getting hurt. If they sacrifice cattle, their wealth is lost. And the kings, they did not like that at times the Brahmins would come out with some rules and regulations against the wishes of the king. So the Brahmanical orthodoxy, it was not only humiliating women and Shudras, it was hurting the economic interest of the Vaishyas, it was also interfering with the politics of the Kshatriyas. In fact, एक और example देता हूं. The Brahmins said that money lending is a sin. Money lending is a sin, पाप है ये, अधर्म है. In fact, most of the religions of the world, they denounce, वो खराब मानते हैं money lending को. Are you aware about this? Do you know that even as per today, especially in one religion, that money lending is considered to be very, very bad. It's considered to be sin. Yes? Anybody? Nobody. इस्लाम में मनी लेंडिंग को आज भी सिन माना जाता है, हराम माना जाता है, और बहुत सारे रिलीजन में इसको क्रिटिसाइज किया गया था. वाई? और ये एक्चुअली में उस जमाने में शायद खराब होता होगा. से फॉर एग्जाम्पल, अगर आप मेरे साथ अभी नीचे उतरे क्लास के बाद, है ना, आपका स्कूटी में पंक्चर है, यू आस्क मी सर आप हमको 100 रुपया देगा, यू नो आई एम नॉट कैरिंग माई वॉलेट, आई विल से ओके फाइन टेक दिस 100 रुपीज, बट टुमारो यू विल हैव टू रिटर्न मी 102 रुपीज. है ना, इंस्टेंट मौका है 2 रुपए प्रॉफिट कमाने का. आप क्या सोचेगा मेरे बारे में? कैसा आदमी है ना? He's trying to exploit the situation. That is what is money lending. Yes or no? मेरे पास पैसा नहीं है, हम मांगने गया पैसा, प्लीज गिव मी मनी. मेरे पास पैसा नहीं है, somebody is giving me money and asking me to return more money. That's what is money lending. So in a way, it doesn't sound very human. But today, basically, we don't borrow money only for our needs. Yes or no? हमारे पास ऑल्टो खरीदने का डाउन पेमेंट है, तो हम क्या सोचते हैं, चलो बैंक से लोन लेके स्विफ्ट खरीद लेता है. बेसिकली वी डोंट जस्ट बोरो फॉर आवर नीड्स. यस और नो? ग्राउंड फ्लोर सिर्फ क्यों बनाए, बैंक लोन लेके 3 फ्लोर बना लेगा. सो बिजनेस में, है ना, बिजनेस करने वालों के लिए मनी लेंडिंग नेसेसिटी है, राइट? सो वैश्यास अब उनको बोल रहा है ये धर्म का काम नहीं कर रहा, ये अधर्म कर रहा है. सो ऑल दिस रिजल्टेड इनटू social orthodoxy, that the Brahmanical orthodoxy, it was not in sync with the requirement of people. The Brahmanical orthodoxy, it was not in sync with the needs of the people, with the requirements of the people. And that is why over a period of time there came a strong counter to the Brahmanical orthodoxy, and people started to counter the Brahmanical orthodoxy. Am I clear? So some facts over here, that Brahmanical orthodoxy increased, right? And they were asking for more rituals and sacrifices. Rituals and sacrifices, okay. And then, for example, say that there was a god of Shudras, that the god that Shudras worshipped, usko bola jata tha Pusan god. Pusan, worshipped by Shudras. The Brahmins did not worship this god. Brahmins did not worship Pusan, Pusan. So there was a lot of orthodoxy. The society was on a boil. So if I just compare now, that what happened from early Vedic age, as we move from early Vedic age to a later Vedic age, kya hua? That if you look at economy, it became more prosperous. Yes or no? The economic prosperity increased. Politics, it became more powerful, right? Powerful. It became more powerful, and therefore we had many regions, many janpad, which had very, very powerful kings, and also that they had huge prosperity. बहुत पैसा आ रहा था उनके पास. Those janpads which became very, very powerful and very prosperous, ये कौन से जनपद होंगे जिन जनपद में क्या मिलता होगा? कौन सा मेटल मिलता होगा? आयरन, है ना? Those Janapads became the great Janapads, Mahajanapads. So, rise of Mahajanapads. So, after the Vedic age, on one hand, suppose if I'm standing at 600 BC, my one arm, which is the arm of economy and politics over here, that economics and politics, it became very prosperous, very powerful. And therefore, this is taking me towards the direction of the biggest and the most powerful kingdoms of ancient history in India. The biggest powerful kingdoms, Magad, Mauryas, Ashoka, right? Taking me towards that direction. On the other hand, the same Janapads, what they had, their society, it became very, very orthodox. Orthodox, deteriorated, that religion, it became corrupt, that the religious corruption increased, and therefore that the Vedic orthodoxy or the Brahmanical orthodoxy increased. The Brahmanical orthodoxy increased. This increased, and hence a counter came in the form of that in the same Mahajanapads, its society and its religion became very, very corrupt, and therefore this led to a counter that challenged by this Vedic orthodoxy was challenged by the counter Vedic cultures. Those cultures which countered the orthodoxy of Vedas, those cultures which challenged the Brahmanical orthodoxy, those cultures that challenged the Brahmanical orthodoxy. So suppose again, if I'm standing at 600 before Christ, my one arm, which is the arm of polity, the arm of economics, it is becoming powerful, it's becoming prosperous, and therefore that the territories, the Janapads became very, very powerful. They are now called as Mahajanapads. But however, in the same Mahajanapad, the society and the religion became very orthodox, very discriminatory, humiliating to the Shudras and women, hurting the economic interest of the Vaishyas, and taking away the political discretion, or curbing the political power of the Kshatriyas. And therefore, because of this, this orthodoxy, that there was a Brahmanical orthodoxy which was countered by the rise of counter Vedic cultures. So history will go in two different directions. I cannot cover both the things together. So first we will study about the counter Vedic cultures. Once I have completed counter Vedic culture, but remember, when we are studying counter Vedic culture, parallelly in the same society, that the king was very powerful and the economy was prosperous. We will study about the rise of counter Vedic cultures after the Vedic age. Vedic age came to an end in 600 BC. After that, because people, they were literally suffocated, they were choked by the Vedic orthodoxy. And initial counter, look at the frustration of people. Initial counter kaisa kaisa aaya. Whatever I teach now, I will repeat in the next class as well. एक आदमी आया, उसका नाम था मक्खली घोसाल. उसका मानना था that whatever happens in life, it is already predetermined. Everything is a matter of fate. I'm standing here teaching, you are sitting here studying and preparing, it was pre-decided. That everything is destined. Destiny में जो लिखा हुआ है तो change हो ही नहीं सकता है. तो क्यों ऐसा बोल रहा है? क्योंकि the Brahmins were saying that perform this ritual, offer this sacrifice, and your life will change. तो उसको काउंटर करने के लिए मक्खली घोसाल ने क्या बोला? कुछ चेंज नहीं हो सकता है. Whatever is already written is bound to happen. That life is destined, destiny, fate. You cannot change your destiny. You cannot change your fate. So when he is saying this, is he not countering the Vedas, the orthodoxy of Vedas? क्योंकि वैदिक ऑर्थोडॉक्सी क्या बोल रहा है? अच्छा, ये खराब हो रहा है, ये वाला रिचुअल कर दो, ऐसा सैक्रिफाइस करो, लाइफ बेटर हो जाएगा. बट मक्खली घोसाल बोल रहा है, जो लिखा हुआ है वो वही होगा. लिखा हुआ है एग्जाम में होना, जाके घर पे सो जाओ, अपने आप हो जाएगा. That is what Makhili Gosal will say, right? But doesn't sound very, आम आदमी को लगेगा अरे सही में डाउट होगा इस बात पे. So it did not become very popular. In fact, if I can tell you that there was one strong school of thought which came in Hinduism itself. Hinduism, अगर कोई philosophy का student है, so the Hindu philosophy is divided into some 6 different schools of thought. उसमें एक school of thought है जिसको बोलते हैं लोकायत, चारवाक philosophy. चारवाक जब देखा that look, people are sacrificing their own wealth in hope that they will become happy. अपना पैसा मैं आपको दे दूं तो मैं कैसे खुश रहूंगा, right? Religious institutions, they ask for so much of donation, promising people a better life. But चारवाक का बोलना है, there is already a very natural way of to lead a happy life, right? That we have so many sense organs. Just ensure that the sense organs receive pleasure. That pleasure is the only good way of life. चारवाक के फिलॉसफी को बोलते हैं हेडोनिस्टिक स्कूल ऑफ थॉट. हेडोनिज्म मतलब प्लेजर सीकिंग. क्या सही है? वही सही है, दैट गिव्स यू प्लेजर. गलत क्या है? दैट गिव्स यू पेन. In fact, there is a very famous Sanskrit shloka of Charvak. वो बोलता है यावत जीवेत सुखम जीवेत. जब तक जियो सुख के साथ जियो, है ना? जब तक जियो सुख के साथ जियो. ये क्या कि अपने ऊपर कष्ट लेकर, अपने आप को पेन में डालकर 10 दिन तक भूखे रहेंगे so that God becomes happy and gives me with all good result. कि जब तक जियो सुख से जियो. यावत जीवेत सुखम जीवेत. लोग बोलते हैं लेकिन कैसे, पैसा नहीं है, हाउ विल वी एंजॉय लाइफ? वो आंसर देता है, बोलता है ऋणम कृत्वा, ऋण लोन लो, ऋणम कृत्वा घृतम पिबेत. कि लोन लो लेकिन ये रूखा सूखा रोटी मत खाओ, घी लगा के खाओ, बटर लगा के खाओ. उस पे पैसा नहीं है, लोन ले लो. पीपल से लेकिन लोन ले लेगा, वापस कैसे उसको करेगा? He says that शुरू से that यावत जीवेत सुखम जीवेत ऋणम कृत्वा घृतम पीबेत भस्मीभूतस्य यस्य शरीरः. जब ये शरीर भस्म हो जाएगा, पुनरागतम कुतः, कौन आके तुमसे तुम्हारा लोन वापस मांग पाएगा? Right? Something that Vijay Mallya, Nirav Modi, they followed and are leading a very, happy life. Did you see their वो Instagram पे जो उन्होंने पिक्चर डाला या X पे, I don't know, यूरोप में पार्टी करते हुए, है ना, raising a toast with a caption, the 2 biggest fugitives of India. Look at the audacity, look at the power. You are challenging the government in broad daylight, right? They are leading a happy life maybe because they followed Charvak too much, right? कि पैसा ले लो, है ना, और लाइफ एंजॉय करो. वापस कोई मांगने आए किसी और से लेके दे दो. एंड में तो मरना ही है, लोन बहुत सारा भी है, मर ही गए तो क्या ही तुम्हारा कोई कर लेगा, राइट? दैट वाज द वे ऑफ लाइफ. द चारवाक की एक फिलॉसफी है. इन अ वे it is narrating us the frustration against the Vedic orthodoxy, right? Okay, so don't think that I have taken 5 more minutes. That watch is fast. Okay, so see you tomorrow. Okay, for the final time, let me ask one thing. Are you comfortable with the pace of the class? Pakka? Okay, good. Thank you. Tomorrow, see, whenever I say a tomorrow on Saturday, it means Monday. Okay? And please, Saturday is a working day. I was compelled to put that message in group because I had some 10 messages asking, aaj class hoga ya nahi hoga? Right? Sunday is an off. Rest all the 6 working days are class. Right? कुछ भी हो जाए, बारिश हो जाए, कुछ हो, it will be class. Okay? Thank you.